Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 135. Quick reminder to please follow Identirati Office Hours on LinkedIn. That helps us. Our guest today is Spencer Erickson, Senior Product Manager Technical at AWS, and Liana Hadarian, Principal Applied Scientist at Amazon Services. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to chat.
So let's just start with backgrounds real quick. Liana, how did you find your way into applied sciences and Cedar?
My background is in automated reasoning. I actually got my PhD working on these things called SMT solvers that I think will come up a bit later in the conversation. Since then, I've also been working on applying formal methods techniques to program analysis and static analysis. And AWS was one of the places that is where you can really take these techniques and apply them in industry and make a big difference. So that's how I ended up here.
And Amazon has one of the biggest, I guess, applied reasoning groups in the world, right? So
it's quite impressive. It started as a as a relatively small group, and now there are several automated reasoning groups within Amazon working on anything from policy analysis to code analysis, verification, model checking. It's a very exciting place to be.
Nice. So Spencer, how did you? What was your path?
Yeah, so I started my career off doing cybersecurity consulting. I worked for a firm called Deloitte, and there we did compliance audits and would respond to customer breaches and perform remediation actions there. And then I ended up coming to Amazon as a product manager, and I started on the retail side of the business, working in our private brands organization. So these are things that Amazon makes and sells itself. And so I worked in a science organization there, helping improve the shopping experience on Amazon.com. But then wanted to get back into more of my security roots and found my way to the AWS side, where I work with Liana in our identity org and our security org, building more secure products for AWS customers. So I've worked on Cedar. I've also worked on features for AWS Identity Center and Amazon Verified Permissions as well too.
Cool. So the topic today is the Cedar Analysis Toolkit. I saw this article that you guys wrote, and I said, that sounds like a good topic for an IOH episode. And so maybe, Liana, I could just start with a high level. What is the Cedar Analysis Toolkit?
Sure. One of the, guiding principles for designing Cedar has been to make sure that language is analyzable. So what do we mean by that? It basically means that you can take Cedar policies and encode them in this logical formula that describe all possible requests that could be allowed by a policy. And this is a very valuable building block that helps you prove certain properties about your policy. So you can prove things that certain people will never get access to certain resources, or the opposite, that people who should have access to a certain resource will always get that access, and under what conditions. So with the Cedar Analysis Toolkit, we basically open sourced two components. One is what we call the Cedar Symbolic Compiler, and it is this component that takes your policies and compiles them to this formal logical language that you can use SMT solvers to reason about. And the second component is a CLI that uses the compiler to kind of show you some of the kind of checks and properties you can do with Cedar analysis. So some of these checks are comparing two policy sets for expressiveness, or looking for logical inconsistencies in the policy sets.
So Spencer, one of my concerns actually. So we, we're cards on the table. Like we're very pro Cedar here at Glue. We built a product around Cedar called the Cedarling, and we've been telling customers like one of the reasons why we like Cedar is because it's analyzable. But at the same time, this is a big ask. Like the organizational readiness for this, I'm worried that it's a big ask. Um, and one of the things I like about Amazon is that a lot of times they like to develop internally and then release to the public stuff that they're using anyway, like sell their excess capacity, for example. And before we dive into this, is there any public use cases today of Amazon actually using this approach of analyzability and Cedar?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that we hear a lot from customers around the what they really like about Cedar being really readable and easy to understand, has a really easy learning curve in terms of producing new, getting started with Cedar and implementing policies for your applications, and that's really good feedback that we hear. And again, we do hear feedback from customers around like, hey, it'd be really nice if I'd be able to better understand how these changes are, how when I make changes to these policies, how that impacts the authorization within my system. And that's really why we started to go down this process here of releasing these toolkits to kind of set us down this path of releasing tools and ability for customers to run their own analysis and really test out what they're finding interesting about changes to their policies. And so this release really starts to put us down that path for future releases in the future of how we could have some greater analyzability with Cedar policies.
So Liana, maybe you could sketch the boundaries of like, what does the tool do today? Like, what are the basic capabilities we started with?
Yeah, so I think the right way to think about it is like of the symbolic compiler as a building block that you can start building more complex analysis from. So the tool right now has two modes. The CLI we put out there has two modes. So one of them is you give it. Think of the following use case: you have a set of Cedar policies, and you want to refactor them for readability, for example. And you want to know that the changes you made to your policies are the intended ones. You want to make sure, I just wanted to refactor this so the structure makes more sense. I don't want to change access control at all. So what you can now do with the analysis tool is you can run the policy comparison mod that's going to take your original set of Cedar policies, your modified set of Cedar policies, and give you a detailed report for each action, Cedar action, how access control changed. So for example, it could tell you that, for the add user action for this resource type and this principal type, the new policy set is more permissive. Or it's equivalent to the previous one, and this is more than testing. If the tool says it's equivalent, then you know there exists no request that could have been allowed by the initial set of policies, but not by the other one. So that's one mode where it gives you insight into the changes you're making to a policy set when you can compare to policy sets. And the other mode is you just give it all of your Cedar policies, and it looks at them pairwise and tries to look for any weird logical inconsistencies. So for example, something a type of logical inconsistency you actually I've made myself by accident is you can have a policy that completely overrides an existing policy. So you can end up with a permit policy that has no effect because there is a forbid policy that completely cancels it out. And usually that usually indicates some kind of deeper logical error that needs to be fixed. And there's other types of checks like maybe the way you've written your policies, they don't allow any actions of a certain type. Again, that's suspicious, because why would you define a type of action if it's never allowed, right? So those are some of the initial checks we've implemented, but there's more you can do.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting here is, like, as developers, we do a really good job of trying to define test cases for us to test changes in
That's exactly where I was going, actually.
Oh, good, good.
Let me phrase my question, and then you can keep going. The question was, when I speak with a lot of OPA developers and I tell them, well, Cedar's analyzable, they say, well, I have my test cases, and if my test cases run, I'm good. So why do I need analysis? Is that sort of the direction you were going?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think for, as developers, we do a good job of, like, hey, these are some of my test cases that I personally can think of, and I'm going to write these test cases. But as humans, our ability to enumerate these tests is limited, and we're going to run into scenarios where we don't think about specific edge cases that we might miss. With analyzability and kind of the Cedar Analysis Toolkit, we test all possible scenarios for access to for authorization decisions on a policies. So it takes your small set of test cases and then extends that to any number of possible access scenarios and tests all of them in order to determine what is actually happening with your policies and formally prove the analysis capability. So, as humans, we have flaws in our tests and our ability to enumerate all of the possible scenarios, and analysis removes those human errors and tests for all possible scenarios, which is really awesome.
Okay, I'm going to go geekier than we normally go on this show, but so Cedar has a couple of syntaxes. There's a human readable and a JSON syntax, and this analysis tool somehow converts that into a different format and then uses something called lean, I gather, to do analysis. This is way above my pay grade, but I wouldn't want to go too deep. But Liana, maybe you could just give us an idea, like, how does it work behind the scenes?
Yeah. So actually, so the way it works, the Cedar Symbolic Compiler is implemented in Lean, actually, and Lean is both a programming language and a proof assistant. So the code that actually takes the Cedar policy and gives you this SMT formula is implemented in Lean. And the nice thing about the fact that it's implemented in Lean is that we can prove that the translation, maybe I'm going too rabbit hole right now, but we can prove that the translation between whatever the original policy was to whatever formula we're gonna give to the SMT solver, the backend solver, we can prove that that is an actual, a correct encoding of the semantics of the Cedar policies. So there's two properties we prove. One, that if analysis is gonna tell you that your policies have a certain property, so for example, that they always, I don't know, they never were allowed this untrusted person to do this untrusted thing, then you know 100% that is accurate. And the other way is that if analysis tells you that this scenario can happen, this access can happen, then you know that can actually happen. It's not a false alarm. So those are the properties that we're able to prove about analysis because of the fact that it's implemented in Lean. And to go back, so once you take your policies and convert them into SMT format, then we use this off-the-shelf SMT solvers that you can think of it as like a equation solver that takes this like little script and executes it and kind of reasons about all the possible combinations of cases and then gives you an answer whether the thing you're asking, yes, it's possible, or no, it's not possible. So that's kind of how the whole tool chain works.
In a nutshell.
Yeah, sorry. So, in a big nutshell.
No, that was awesome. So Spencer, my follow-up question, you might have no opinion about this, and that's fine, but why couldn't we use that same approach for Rego? Take the Rego, convert it into SMT, do some type of analysis. Is it possible for Rego?
Yep. I'm actually not super familiar with Rego, so I don't have an opinion there. So I might not be the best person to answer that question.
Liana, do you have any opinion on that? Any thoughts? I don't know if you looked at Rego at all.
I'm not a Rego expert either, but what I do know is it's more expressive than Cedar. They have things like loops and recursion, and the problem with those is, I think when we say Cedar is analyzable, it means you can encode it in a. The problem with those is that if you're trying to reason about loops in using formal methods and logic, that's an undecidable problem. So there's no way you can do this automatically and efficiently. And the thing
You
about
could have
Cedar,
an infinite loop is the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And it's in Cedar, we've been very deliberate about what features we want to allow, so that each feature of the language can be reduced to one of these formulas that you can solve quickly and efficiently. Because another aspect of analysis, you have to get an answer at some point. You can't let it run for 5 hours. So so yeah, that's one of the differences, I would say, and why analyzability is something that you kind of have to have in mind when you're designing a language, because it's really easy to have feature creep that makes it really hard to have this kind of reduction to logic where you can do this exhaustive reasoning. It doesn't come for free.
Right. Somebody asked me yesterday, a customer was like, why can't I do an HTTP GET from my Cedar policy? It's like, okay, well, how would we know that ever returns, for example? Spencer, I'm sorry. Please comment on that. And I was also, okay, just if you wanted to comment on that, please, and then I'll move to the next question.
I was just going to add this idea around, as we take these Cedar policies and essentially convert them into these mathematical formulas, it allows for really clear comparison between potential changes in policies or in complete policy sets as well too. So as we've taken these multiple policies within a policy set and converted them into these mathematical formulas, that removes, some of these, logic loops that Liana was talking about, issues with those logic loops, and it allows us to better compare them against a different policy, an updated policy set, and really understand what the changes are, because we are using these mathematical formulas instead of, we're converting this language of words and functions into these mathematical formulas that are then very much easier to be compared against one another, and how these policies not only interact with each other, but also interact with the changes that have been made to them as well too.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My cat has a weird radar for the live stream starting. The live stream starts, and so she comes right in and tries to distract me. I wanted to go a little bit into so this tool is really a starting point. This is still, Cedar's still very early. I feel like we're in the embryonic phase of this right now. Did writing this tool actually open your eyes about new possibilities or new directions? And Spencer, did you see any areas where you might want to go next in this tool?
Yeah, so one of the things that we saw as we were writing this as well, and that we also had a blog post about as well too on the same day, was an MCP tool that we launched that would call out to Cedar Analysis. And so what we hear a lot from customers and users of Cedar is, I'm using a coding assistant to help me generate Cedar policies. But when I ask the coding assistant to write a new policy or refactor policies, I start to see logical errors in what the coding assistant is providing me. And I want some higher assurance around being able to trust the policies that my coding assistant is producing for me. And so along with this, we also launched an MCP tool that you can implement in something like, Amazon Q or, Claude coding assistants to say like, hey, I'm writing this. I have these Cedar policies. I want to change this. I want to refactor this large, complex Cedar policy into 3 smaller, easier to understand Cedar policies. Q CLI, go and change this policy. And it can then call out, it can then go make an attempt to write the new policy and break it into 3 smaller ones, and then call out to Cedar Analysis, pass in your Cedar schema, and then run the analysis to check like, hey, I've written this, I've taken this large policy, I've broken it into 3 smaller ones, confirm that these 3 smaller policies represent an equivalent permissions to this one larger policy set, and be able to come back and say like, yes, coding assistant can then come back and say, yes, I've changed this policy, I've broken it into 3 smaller ones, called Cedar Analysis, and it's confirmed that these new policies provide equivalent permissions than the old, larger, complex ones. So as we think about coding assistants and how we help improve the usage of those while also providing high level assurance and keeping the LLMs in tight guardrails, so that way we can move quickly, but also have high assurance of quality of those, of what they produce is really exciting for us.
When I first got started with Cedar, and as we've been building tools at Glue, one of my concerns was policy authoring. Like I used to say, it's really easy to read Cedar. Like if I'm presented with Cedar, I can read it, but it's not always so easy to figure out what's the best way to express my policy when I'm writing it. We tried to build tools at Glue, like to use low code to author these policies. We found that the low code tools actually were harder to use than just a text editor. Like actually just authoring the policies was easier, and the tools were harder to use. And I've come to the conclusion that actually the best code authoring tool is the prompt, and just getting an AI coding assistant to generate a set of policies for me. And so I'm somewhat I feel like that was the right answer, that they can stay in text and I don't have to write them and I can just read them. So that seems perfect to me. But I wanted to push a little bit on the scale question. Liana, you mentioned we don't want it to take like 5 hours to evaluate. What are some of the limitations on this analysis that you saw in implementing it, and what might we have to worry about with regard to these kind of tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, the analysis engine, it's the right way to think about it is it's like a compiler that gives you this artifact that a solver consumes. And a lot of the compilation step is going to be fast. That bit is fine. That's not going to take a long time. The solving part is when you throw it over the fence to this thing called an SMT solver that's doing this exhaustive proof of what this formula means. That's where things can get slow. And while Cedar has been designed to be analyzable, as we keep saying this, there's different constructs in the language that can be more challenging for analysis. As an example, the datetime construct, that one can generate constraints that are more challenging for the backend solver to reason about. So
did you say date/time?
Yeah,
okay.
datetime. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a recent Cedar extension that lets you talk about dates and time.
Was this token issued before the expiration, for example?
Exactly. Yeah. And again, there are some evil inputs you can craft to make it take a longer time than necessary. So I would say that when you're writing your policies, there are some constructs that are going to end up being more challenging for analysis. Another example is that we haven't seen customers use it almost at all is arithmetic. Cedar supports integers, and those are actually machine integers and get reduced to 64-bit integers. So if you start writing nonlinear equations about these things, again, that's not going to be very efficient to reason about. It's a hard math problem. It's possible, but it's probably not going to be as quick. But those are usually some of the features that are not commonly used. Yeah.
Before we started, I talked about the dream being that we have SOC 2 and ISO 27001 requirement for X, and I want to look at my Cedar policies and say, can I get some level of confidence that this is true? So Spencer, you worked at Deloitte. I'm sure you understand these requirements. How close are we to that? Is that a dream, or is that do you think that that's possible?
Yeah, I don't think it's a dream. I definitely think that there is a way for as we think about these policies and the proofs associated with them, there's real value in the audit use cases. For me as an auditor, I spent hours and hours trying to gather evidence around how certain applications and systems worked, and taking screenshots and watching over shoulders of people as they navigated their database and asking a bunch of really basic questions that took a ton of time and hours to produce. And I definitely see a world where we can have the right explanations about the analysis capabilities and the right supporting evidence to say, like, hey, we can prove this. We can prove that system A acts in a certain way and does not authorize access to unintended users. We can prove that the system is, I'm trying to think of a good compliance use case here, where
two-factor authentication.
We can prove that all access can require two-factor authentication. Exactly. And I definitely think that there's, as we think about how we report, how as applications report on compliance, if we have Cedar policies enforcing some of these conditions, like there's real great opportunity to bring that into like the evidence compilation and reporting of these to auditors to prove compliance in a really fast and also high assurance way as well too, because even as auditors, like we make mistakes, or we may not catch everything, and this again increases that level of assurance.
So Liana, you're a math PhD, or is that considered a math PhD, or is it a computer science PhD? Yeah,
computer science, yeah.
But your level of expertise is going to be way over the average IT department, enterprise IT department. Did you have concerns about the level of difficulty, or the sort of, or like I said before, the organizational readiness of enterprises to actually consume this technology?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because, and that's something we're thinking very hard about, is we have this very powerful technology, but it's kind of high touch in the sense that there's like complicated math behind it. And we're trying to figure out what's the simplest like push button way that people can use it without having to understand all the complexity that goes under it. And part of open sourcing it was us putting a couple of examples of, here are some use cases we thought about. Again, one of them is understand the changes you're making to your policies. I think that's something maybe that's not, you don't need to be a formal methods expert to understand that, oh, I changed this policy and now I can, the tool tells me that, oh, it's more permissive, and here is an example of a request where that wasn't allowed before and now it's allowed. I think that's something that could be consumed by somebody in an enterprise IT department. But with that said, there are still other use cases that maybe we haven't thought about that we'd want to hear from the community.
And I guess it's sort of up to us as tools designers to actually make this accessible. So
Yes.
I guess the ball is in our court as software vendors to actually make this.
So one of the feedback we got when we first demoed the current version of the CLI was exactly this. We're like, well, you're telling me that the changes I made my policies said more permissive, but how? And can you be more concrete? And yes, we can, because technology can do it. We can actually give you an example of a request that wasn't possible before, and now it's possible. And you can build extensions on top of this that can kind of enumerate, for example, you can generate test cases based on using analysis and automatically generate inputs for requests that would be allowed or denied by your policies. So.
I was sort of hoping that it didn't tell me this is more permissive, but policy number whatever is more permissive than the previous version, or that it gave me more detail. Or like you said, if it could generate test cases, that would be really good.
This is all something that it's technically possible to do, and with the technology.
Yeah. So Spencer, a lot of the enterprises, I feel like when we talk to them about new authorization technologies, they just think about the mountain of technical debt that they're basically carrying for decades, and they're like, oh, this all sounds great, but then they're thinking about the COBOL code in the mainframe. If you're in the enterprise, how do you get from here to there? Or do you have any thought? I mean, maybe this is outside of your expertise, but any thoughts on that? How do we get there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's definitely a journey for all customers. As we move to, moving to your systems to moving them on the cloud and, removing tech debt and modernizing their systems, there are going to be, real opportunities to make changes here. And so I think we have to recognize that customers are, and users are all on this journey, and being able to, I think what's really great about Cedar and how we think about it is how do we make it really easy for someone to be able to come in and to adapt quickly and test quickly, but then also assure that it's going to meet their use cases as well too. So this idea around, hey, as I start to think about modernizing, my system, what is out there, and what are the real benefits that I'm going to get from Cedar. And I think we recognize that everyone is on this journey to figure out how to best change their authorization or improve it to increase the security parameters of their application. So I think for us it's all about hey, how do we continually improve Cedar to make it easier to adapt, easier to understand, easier to analyze. That way it can start to fit more use cases as users start to think about modernizing their applications.
Yeah, I have a thought about this one too. And one of my thoughts is instrumentation, not necessarily authorization. So maybe for some of those legacy apps, we implement our authorization system and what policies we think, and we just log it. And that way we at least have a normalization of our audit log and our sort of policy management, even if the application itself is not listening to our authorization service as authoritative. But this idea of maybe instrumentation is an in-between step where you don't change the behavior of the apps, but maybe you just add in, I would have made this call. Let's log what we would have done, and let's start to observe. And that way we can get more data about the risk of when we eventually do this upgrade. But yeah, I always tell customers, I don't think there's any magic magic bullet here to upgrading technical debt, but we don't want to add more technical debt by doing something that's not ideal. So we want to fix it going forward and then worry about that mountain of technical debt. But it is a tough question, and I've been on the other side, on the enterprise, and so I do sympathize a lot with the customers in this area. Sorry, yeah, Liana, go ahead.
I just think it's interesting you mentioned this use case where you have a log of authorization decisions, and then maybe you want to generate a set of policies that would kind of, I guess, match this this authorization behavior. That's actually a use case we've heard from customers, and there is a research group that's actually looking into using Cedar analysis to make this possible. So it's again, and they're implementing something that would look at your, if you have requests that have been allowed, denied, and assuming that's the intended behavior, it would generate a set of policies that are guaranteed to, have that authorization behavior, because of this analysis features. So
through maybe even through code generation, we observe your logs and then code generate and then put it back in the tester and make sure it works. So it's all like one big
and then
update of legacy apps somehow. Yeah. Spencer, I'm going to put you on the spot for another question. I don't think I put in here in our list, but a lot of customers I hear talk about the need for dynamic data in their authorization policies. And so any thoughts, like what's your approach to handling or thinking about some of these challenges around, I couldn't possibly express this policy in Cedar because I have to call this database in real time to find out X. Any thoughts on that challenge?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that we hear from customers as well too, and things that we're thinking about how to solve, with Cedar, and then also with other use cases here internally at AWS, maybe with like Amazon verified permissions as well too. But it's definitely something we hear from customers a lot around, like, hey, I have these additional attributes about the user, and I want to be able to enforce my authorization policies based off of these really dynamic attributes around maybe like, location or job title or something like that, and how we are able to, or, functionality of like the application as well too. And how do I inject that, those attributes into the policy authoring decision as well too. So it's definitely something we hear from customers. And I definitely think it's a really valid use case. And we're trying to think about ways that we can solve those aspects. And, Cedar is really good at that around like, hey, if you're able to give us the attributes, we are able to, you're able to express some of that in Cedar and be able to make those policy authoring decisions for access to your application as well too. So it's definitely a use case that we think is valid and that we hear a lot from customers as well.
Yeah, my take on this one is the application should get that data and then put it into the policy, or B, we should issue a token so we have that external data signed, so we have provenance around it. But yeah, it's just one of those things, like there's a whole group of people who won't be convinced because they think unless my PDP is actually connected to a database, there's no way this is ever going to work. But actually, I want to, Liana, this is a question. I don't know that you're going to have any opinion on this, but do you think that these new tools make any new governance sort of paradigms possible? Because our old governance paradigms around RBAC, they're showing their limitations. And now we have these new tools. Do you think that there are new ways we'll be able to govern based on these new tools?
I think they can give you a new level of assurance. And when you say new tools, do you mean like the analysis
Yes.
type? Yeah. I think they can give you a new level of assurance and automation. And something Spencer just mentioned from his past life as working with audit teams. And right now, a lot of the auditing process, it can be very manual and point in time. Somebody goes, takes a screenshot, somebody looks at the configuration line summary, and is this right or wrong or whatever, and then they put that big pile of papers and then send it off. What you can do with this kind of automated reasoning-based tools that are automatic, you can basically translate your compliance requirements in an input for these tools, and then run these checks continuously. For every change of your policies, you would run and check, oh, does my policy still respect this requirement? Yes or no? And then when you need to generate your audit, you just push a button and they're like, here's the report that of all the checks we've performed, and they all passed. And you also have the confidence that in between the each audit, the status hasn't changed. There was no moment where your policies weren't enforced and they weren't strong enough. So that's the dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Speed and high assurance all at the same time, I think would be amazing.
I thought of a new acronym, GAC, governance as code.
There you go. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're right around time. So last thoughts, Spencer. Why don't we give you first last thoughts?
Yeah. We're
up there.
Yeah. Yeah, we're really excited about this release of Cedar, and we're really excited to see how people in the community are using it. We're able, Leon and I are in a really fortunate space to be able to talk to engage with the Cedar community and hear stories around how people are using the Cedar Analysis Toolkit for things like Kubernetes, or how we're thinking about it when it comes to AI and agentic use cases. And so to see people use the Cedar Analysis Toolkit is really exciting for us. And so I think we would love to hear from folks in our Slack community. Join our Slack community. Play around with the CLI tool. Think about other use cases that you might have, and bring those to us in the engage with us on Slack and in the Cedar community, because we'd love to chat about different use cases and think about how we can improve the Cedar policy language overall.
Awesome. Liana, any last thoughts?
Yeah. Well, obviously, completely agree with everything Spencer said. Let us know what you think of it. I guess something I wanna add. I think we're living in a very exciting times where LLMs are routinely used to author code, policies, and all of these things. And I do genuinely think that building tools that have this kind of formal backing that can work in conjunction with LLMs that help people be more productive and generate these policies. I think that's a really interesting space, and where you can get that extra level. You can get the speed of using the speed of vibe policy coding, and the assurance of making sure that you are still writing secure policies. So yeah, I guess I just want to encourage people to vibe code and try Cedar Analysis.
Nice. Okay, well, I think we are done for today. I just want to quickly announce the next episode with Andy Hindle, who is the director, I guess, organizer, conference chair of Identiverse for like 10 years. And next year, I guess he's retired, but we're going to hear his thoughts about 10 years of Identiverse on next episode. And with that, I will say thank you, audience. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Liana. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.